But what I like to also say is Mission Reconcile is not about changing that ethos, right? You're called to whoever you're called to. My hope is that God is moving with whoever is leading, and you're listening and you're churning. What Mission Reconcile wants to do is how do we just challenge that with where you are, with the five stones in your hand? How do we challenge that? Just bridge the gap.
Kahlida with Mission Reconcile. Welcome to the podcast today. How's your day going?
It's going good. Thanks so much for having me. I'm
I've been
excited
looking forward
to
to talking
have
with
a
you.
conversation.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to talking with you. I've been enjoying spending time on your website and watching videos there to hear about the goal and the mission of Mission Reconcile. Before we get into more of your story and your background, tell me a little bit of a quick overview of what does Mission Reconcile do and what's the big goal?
So overall, it's about reconciling our communities, right? Like that's the big goal. When we think about who we are as people in this world that we're living in, we're meant to be in community, we're meant to be in fellowship. And so when there's a divide in those relationships and these people that inhabit this world, I believe that God's heart is grieved. And I believe that that's not how we're supposed to live, because we're supposed to be in community. And so the big goal is how do we reconcile? And for this nation called America, race and racism and this concept of that has divided us. There's been like a racial divide amongst that. And so Mission Reconcile uses this core belief of faith. Like, we all believe in some type of faith. And for those who are Christian, they believe in kind of one kind of traditions and different ways. And so how do we bring together predominantly single race churches, a predominantly white church, a predominantly black church, bring them into partnership, connect them, and facilitate conversation, right? How does it look like to talk to one another, build relationship through those conversations, and see what God does after that?
I love that. You're hitting the nerve with me because guilty as charged. I serve as one of the leaders in our church, elder pastor leaders in our church, and I'm sitting here going, I don't know how to bridge the gap. I live in a predominantly Caucasian area, and we have other races in our church, but how do we grow in that? How do we develop that? So I'm really excited to talk to you today to learn more. So you mentioned single race churches are predominantly single race churches or one race churches. What is the makeup across the country? Do you have any idea of how many churches are really representative of their community in the racial makeup of their church?
So, when you go back to history, right? One of our first programs was with an AME church. So AME is African Methodist Episcopal, and UCC, United Church in Christ, church. And so the AME pastor, actually the UCC pastor, brought a message around what historically came about the AME church. And if we just think about how history has just been within our Christian faith or been within the Christian faith, it has played a role in terms of race, right? Black people were not able to worship with white people. There was segregation even in the church. Martin Luther King has a quote that the most segregated hour on Sunday morning is 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
And so, although we have made strides, for sure, right? We still coexist in this kind of separate predominant church. And so I don't know the percentage, but I remember when we were first starting, and at this point now it's about 8 years ago,
Yeah.
we did some Pew research around how many predominantly single race churches there were, and there was no shortage.
Yeah.
There was no shortage of
Pick
them.
a church, and that's probably what you're going to find.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so they still exist. We have come with great strides. But what I like to also say is Mission Reconcile is not about changing that ethos, right? You're called to whoever you're called to. My hope is that God is moving with whoever is leading, and you're listening and you're churning. What Mission Reconcile wants to do is how do we just challenge that with where you are, with the
Yeah.
with the five stones in your hand? How do we challenge that? How do
The
we
goal is not go to a different church or get people in your church a different, but let's bridge the gap between your church and another church.
just bridge the gap? you
Yeah.
know? And so, maybe it's a mile down the street, this other church, and you've been passing it every day and you never thought to connect with them. Maybe it's 10 miles. Maybe it's 15 miles. Maybe it doesn't exist at all in terms of like close proximity, but how do we get creative about how we can create that, right? I think COVID gave us this virtual world, and so where there's a will, there's a way of being able to create the space.
I know that
Hmm.
conversation is the starting point. Tell us more about how conversation has impacted not just Mission Reconcile, but how we could use that as a tool to impact our world.
So, when we think about who we have talked to, right? In order to have a relationship with someone, in order to get a business going, in order to pretty much do anything we need to do,
Yeah.
we need to communicate in some way, right?
Mhm.
There needs to be some type of conversation where knowledge is being exchanged, culture is being exchanged, relationship is growing. And so for us, conversation was a vital part. We just saw that we weren't talking to each other. We
Mm.
weren't, we were asking questions, but we weren't in relationship with those who maybe could give you an answer or at least give you a perspective about that question or that answer. And so we felt like the a very low bar was let's just have a conversation. Let's talk about the big things, the little things, the things in between, and bridge it with just being able to connect and break bread, right? So the other
Yeah.
part is breaking bread.
Mm.
And
So,
so,
as you and I know, it's easy to have a is easy to talk with someone, but not really have a conversation. It's easy to have words back and forth, but not really go past the how's the day going, how's your family doing. What are some questions, or do you have any recommendations as prompts to kind of help dig into a deeper? Because candidly, it's awkward to sit down with somebody who's of a different race and say, "Hey, you're black, I'm white, we're different. Let's talk about that thing." Like that's a hard starting point, but also that's really where I want to get to. I want to get to tell me about your culture. Tell me about your life, your upbringing. Let me tell you about my life. So, what are some? Do you have some conversation prompts or starters that could help?
yeah, so one of the things we call is courageous conversation, right?
Yeah,
Because it's about being courageous in your conversation, not just kind of surface, if you will. And so we kind of build it up with a couple different things. One, we create a cultural experience together is the goal. So you at least have like a bedrock of where to have a conversation or start it. And that's by having each church visit one another's church. And then that respective pastor bring a message around reconciliation. And so you, after that service, you connect and we have kind of facilitated conversation around questions about the sermon, the experience. Have you ever been to a predominantly black church? Have you ever been to a predominantly white church? Have you ever, if the church had a gospel choir, have you ever heard a gospel choir? If the church had more of a contemporary, just kind of really sharing differences of how your faith was. But really, some really rock starters that we have is like, tell me about how you have come to faith, right? Like, everyone has their story of how they come to know faith, whether it was from their upbringing, their childhood, or even adulthood. And so that's kind of our like a breaker, right, if you will. Like, how did you come to faith? The other one is how did you first learn about race? Like, what was your first concept of just this concept of race? And we talk about how race is a social construct and all those different things in some further programming. But, what was your concept of race? And then
mm,
people have stories around that. Like, I never met someone from another race until I got to college, on both
mm,
sides, right? Or, I've actually never lived or been in relations with anyone other than the
mm.
people who look like me and my family. And so there's just really good conversations there of different perspectives. And in those like kind of two bedrock conversations for
Yeah.
our role is it also hopefully sheds some opportunity for you to talk more. And so
Mm.
we talk about being curious. How do you get curious about people? So you show yourself friendly, so you could be friendly, right? But
Yeah.
how do we use those like two bedrock conversations about how did you come to know race and what brought you to faith to really start the conversation overall, and then that kind of experience of experiencing maybe a new worship experience that you never had before.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to hear a little bit of your story. Tell me a little bit of your upbringing and what prompted you and drove you to start and be a part of Mission Reconcile.
Yeah, so my family's from the Caribbean, and so I grew up in Florida, born in Tampa, grew up in Miami, Florida, and so I'm a Florida girl, if you will, right? But my family is both sides of my family are from the Caribbean. I'm British Virgin Islands, British West Indies, and so I'd never had the conversations in my household around the Black American experience, if you will. Those were just not conversations in my house. Not that we didn't think it coexisted. And the Caribbean has its own history, if you will. But those just weren't conversations. But I was living in St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands, and I heard God said, "You're going to bring people together based on race." And I was just like, I think you got the wrong person. I think you got the wrong person. I don't really have a perspective about that. I'm here for everybody, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, and I just kind of went with it, moved on. I moved to DC and started to learn even more about this concept of racial reconciliation and what that was. And really, the catalyst of it was another Black Lives Matter incident had happened, and I believe it was Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge. Kind of was so we have our catalytic one, and that got really newsworthy. And it grieved me. I felt like this place that I loved and had really poured into me in my faith, called the church, the institution of church, that is, right? Because you and I are the church, people of the church, um, was silent on this really big moment in history that was egregious and not fair and not godly. It didn't feel like it was of God, right? And so I was like, well, God, what is this thing that you want me to do? I was like, let me circle back. I was living my DC life, having a good time, really observing it. And God brought me to church, and God brought me to what does it look like to bring people together and have some conversations and talk about this so that when and if another incident happens, there's a relationship there, that these questions and this wondering and this kind of chatter doesn't have to exist amongst people of faith, at least.
Yeah.
And so that's really kind of been the catalyst, and I ran with it, and it became Mission Reconcile and rooted in conversation and bringing together churches. And so, yeah.
That's great. And so along the way, you also have a degree in law. You're an attorney, right?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I got to shake that
So
off.
yeah, right. So you're highly educated, but focused on this nonprofit. What is your hope for 5 years from now with Mission Reconcile? What's a dream?
Mm. I want Mission Reconcile to be known for being able to be a catalyst for allowing relationships to grow across racial lines, but rooted in faith. And so that faith can run many different ways, but how do we utilize the faith that everyone believes in terms of the bedrock of people and the
Yeah.
morality of people and what that looks like and the imago Dei of God, like everyone created in God's image, and honor that through relationship with one another. And so if 5 years from now, it could be that Mission Reconcile was part of someone's story
Yeah.
of having a relationship that they otherwise may never have had, then that sounds like a win, and God's really happy.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that. And Kalita, you're running and leading a small nonprofit. As you and others that are running your organizations have challenges in the back office, Accordis, my company, we're a back office
Mhm.
team for nonprofits. So if you're watching this podcast, you can find out more about what Accordis does at accordis.com. You can find out more about Mission Reconcile at imareconciler.org. And also, if you want to get involved, Kalita, what's a way that people could get involved with Mission Reconcile? What's the best way for them to get involved?
Yeah, I think one is going to the website, iamareconciler.org, signing up for our newsletter, because we're going to get that back going.
Okay.
But most of all, if you're led to donate, it's really I've been in this for a little while, and there's no mission without money, right?
Yeah.
You can have the heart, you can have the vision, you can have the wherewithal, but being able to give it capacity is the next level, right? And so, if in any way you feel led to donate or know someone, I
Yeah,
think that is the catalyst right now. But get
yeah,
connected with us through our newsletter, be able to donate if you're so led, and being able to suggest your church. If this feels like something that you feel like your church could lead into, what God did tell me is everyone's not gonna be signing up,
yeah.
and that's okay. We want to reach who God wants, and who is ready and who's able. And so, if your church is one of those churches, or faith communities is one of those who can benefit from the work of Mission Reconcile, we want to be a part of that story and help facilitate. And so, reach out and connect to us in that way too.
Great. Kahlida, thanks so much for your time today. Thanks for being on the
Thank you.
podcast. Have a great day.
You too. You too. Thanks so much.